Good morning. As we continue to listen in, the Apostle Paul is shining the light and opening up our view into the culture of those who reject the authority of God and the consequences. That rejection are catastrophic, disaster for the emotional, spiritual, mental health of individual who holds his arms or her arms and says, I am going to identify myself. I am going to relate to the world around me the way I want to relate, literally, in every way, making themselves the authority of life, rather than acknowledging the fact that God has created them and that God, our creator, has the authority to discover or to decide, and we discover that his decisions are right and correct, that he labels righteousness and wickedness. He recognizes what's good and what's not good for. So when people reject the authority of God in their lives, these consequences are often expressed in their sexuality. It says the women abandoned natural function and burned in and pursued that which is unnatural, having sex with each other. And here in verse 27, it says, and in the same way, also the men abandoned the natural function of burned in their desire toward one another, men with men, committing indecent acts, and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. And we observe that same thing happening today. Homosexuality in all of its forms, USLBGT, questioning queer, all the 33 different letters that go in that mix, simply an expression, a consequence of expression of rebellion. Consequence they receive in themselves, due penalty of their error. It unhinges their mind and heart. It disconnects their emotions. So we're unhinged from the gatepost of life that God has put in place. We are disconnected from the rails like a locomotive disconnects from the rails and then is free from the authority of the train tracks. But it's free to do nothing. And people, same thing in their own lives. They rebel and reject the authority, like the rails, train track. I reject those rails. I don't want God to tell me what I am or what I can and cannot do. I reject his authority, and that is the same as emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, jumping the tracks that God has laid out. And the actions, expressions of this rebellion are indecent, shameful acts that it ought to be embarrassing to speak of them in public. So Paul is going to get to that here in his letter to the Roman church. This is the culture y'all are living in. Well, it's also the culture we're living in today. Not as bad as it was back then, but the trajectory is pretty clear. The United States of America is traveling the same pathway. Roman Empire, as the fabric of morals, integrity disintegrates, so also will the country. So the church today, you and I, have the opportunity to proclaim the truth. That's why I love this letter Paul wrote to them. It addresses these issues, recognizing that sexual immorality, indecent and shameful, but it is an expression. This homosexuality in all of its modern forms is a consequence of rebellion, pressing that rebellion against, receiving in themselves a due penalty, error. But it's a correctable error. That's the good news. It is a correctable, and the consequent due penalty can be lifted from them. Why Jesus came and he died. Not only for the adulterer, but also for the homosexual. Only for the thief, but also for the lesbian. Or what we call the sinner with the unacceptable sins in their life. Also for the sinner with the popular sins, his or her life. Jesus died for all of us and redeemed us and can restore us. And it's all because he loves you. I want to remind you every day, he loves you. God bless you. We love you too.